Welcome to another episode of Becca's Talking here on our new set, brand new set. This is our premiere episode here, and we're getting uptown, and partly because we want to thank our sponsor, the fine folks over at Havana Garage in the Old Market. Havana Garage in the Old Market. You know, one thing about Havana Garage is that, well, first of all, it's been there for a long time, but it's got this incredible humidor. But you say, well, I don't like to smoke cigars. You don't have to like to smoke cigars. You'll love the atmosphere, the ambiance there, because it's got kind of an old school Rat Pack kind of a atmosphere there. You got pictures of Sammy and Dean, and of course, old Blue Eyes himself. Check it out. Yeah, there's occasionally live music, and then when the weather's nice now, it's a great patio out back. Check it out. Make it part of your downtown experience. The fine folks over there at Havana Garage. So, as I said, brand new set here today, right? We got the Becca's Talking set here. And to join us on this inaugural episode is Joe Jeanetta. He is the CEO of Heartland Family Services. And we were talking a bit before we started recording this, Joe. I've heard about Heartland Family Services for I don't know how long. You know, it's forever, it seems. But until we had this scheduled, I didn't even really know what you guys did. You know, I mean, I know that it's a nice charitable organization and everything, but I wasn't even sure what you guys did. So I'll start off with that.
Sure.
What is Heartland Family Services?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Thanks for having me on your show. I appreciate it. Yeah, Heartland Family Service, we've been around a long time, and we still get this feedback, like, I've heard of you, but what do you do? So we're a human service agency that concentrates primarily in two areas. First, mental health. So that includes mental health counseling, substance use treatment, and some prevention work. And then secondly, housing, which includes short-term, long-term, prevention, and then where those two things cross over to serve survivors. So we have programs that are community-based, and we have programs that are residential to help people who are dealing with oftentimes all of those issues at one time.
You say survivors.
Survivors of sexual assault, domestic abuse, domestic violence, and human trafficking and labor trafficking.
Okay, maybe I'm just naive here, and I obviously don't travel in those circles. How big of a problem is human trafficking here in Omaha?
A lot of people are surprised to find out it's a major problem, in large part, well, for lots of different reasons, but one, because I-29 and I-80 crisscross our community, and those are large routes by which people can be trafficked. And then also, at least on the labor trafficking side, we have a lot of agriculture manufacturing where that can take place relatively easily. So, yeah.
Oh, really? So human trafficking, so it's not just prostitutes. Human trafficking to bring up like day laborers and the like.
Yeah, trafficking includes sex trafficking as well as labor trafficking.
Oh, okay.
And we were really fortunate to receive some grant funding from a private foundation to really expand the work we're doing, specifically for labor trafficked survivors, because it's lesser addressed, lesser known, harder to connect with people who are in that experience.
With this current administration sending undocumented workers back to their home country or to a prison in El Salvador, how does that affect you guys? If you're trying to deal with and stop the problem of the human trafficking, does this complicate matters for you?
You know, that's just one piece of what we do, but it complicates matters to the extent that in the past, people would show up and need help, and we would help them. And now, in Nebraska and Iowa, for mental health, if we were going to be using funds that were state provided or federal to state and then to us, we would have to have our clients attest that they were here documented in a documented way. And now we're being asked to do that more across our programs in housing and others. But and of course, if someone from ICE shows up and looking for somebody, we would have to obviously
So you would comply and work with ICE on that?
We would have to comply with them.
Yeah.
I mean, as much as we can, we have to balance compliance because we want to comply with law enforcement whenever we can, and we also have to comply with protection of private health information. So somewhere within that where those two things overlap, we might have a little bit of difficulty, but we'll work through that with ICE if that happens.
It's more complicated than just, I know.
Yeah.
Things have gotten complicated. But you mentioned if you're using state or government funding, how do you get your funding?
So about half of our funding is grant funded, grants and contracts. Another about 35% is fee for service, where we can bill somebody's insurance. But for many of our clients, that would be Medicaid, which is federal. And then the rest is private fundraising. And we get about 1% of our funding from United Way.
So private donations, but a lot of it is all government also, right?
The private donations?
No, I mean, just your funding. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a good mix of our funding is federal or state or city. Yeah.
With all the cutbacks that they're talking about in D.C., has it affected you yet, or?
It hasn't so far. Initially, we had some funding that was frozen, but that was short-lived. And but it's a process that government is working through, and there could be cuts coming up that we just don't know about yet. But so far, none of our funding streams or the programs that we fund or that we operate have been cut.
You mentioned as mental health being one of your prime issues. That's a thing for me that I've been talking about for a long time, because politicians will say I'm going to be tough on crime, and build more prisons, right? But they don't talk about raising taxes and taking care of mental health, which would solve some of the problems that we see with the criminals. We don't pay enough attention to mental health. Yeah. What are you doing? Is there an outreach there? Do people come to find you? How does somebody come to Heartland Family Service with mental health needs?
So the majority of our clients are actually told they have to come see us.
Okay.
Usually by a judge, a probation officer, child welfare worker. But then in short order, our second and most third common referral sources are our current clients and our former clients. So initially people don't necessarily want to come see us. Then they get there. They're achieving some good results or having a good experience, and then they're telling other people that they know, oh, you should go to Heartland if this is a challenge for you, and they'll help you. But we're always trying to get the word out so that more people know that we're a resource that can be trusted and will help make a difference for them.
You say bill the insurance, which in many cases is Medicaid. What if I can't afford it, but I don't have Medicaid? Are there services there that's like on a fee-based system, or?
Yeah, a lot of our services are free or on a sliding fee scale. So we typically do not turn people away because they can't afford to pay for the services. We want to help people.
I really think, for me, I've done some volunteer work in the state pen, and I've seen those prisoners back there. There's some bad guys that need to be locked up for a long time, and there's some good people that just did some bad things. Yeah. And I look back and I think, if they had mental health problems, that dealt with drug and alcohol issues, that dealt with anger issues, that learned about conflict resolution, if they had mental health help prior to this, they might not have gotten into the trouble that they got into.
Yeah, we talk about this a lot. There is a cycle of violence that gets passed down generation after generation, or trauma. And that's a big part of our focus when people come to us, whether it's housing or whether it's mental health or survivor services across that sort of continuum of care. We're always looking to see, is there some underlying trauma here that needs to be addressed? Because if you don't address the underlying trauma, it's going to keep haunting the present. It's oftentimes what's sort of driving substance use, tobacco use, all sorts of different things, because it's untreated and people are just trying to cope with the stress of getting by day to day. So, and we know that hurt people hurt people. So a lot of our clients are survivors, but they've also been on the other end of that. And that carries with it a lot of shame. So doing that deep trauma work is also really helpful because it's helping them to let go of whatever shame they carry as part of that, or how they might have then perpetuated trauma as they went on. So that we're trying to break that cycle.
Is Heartland Family Services, is it a faith-based program?
It's not. When we first started, we were. We started in October 27th of 1875. So this is our 150th year. We're closing in on it. And it was started by 8 Christian Protestant churches. And back then, of course, the government didn't get involved in addressing these kinds of social problems. And so it was typically faith communities that would do this work. And so in 1875, we were in what was then called the Great Depression. 10 years after the Civil War ended, a lot of people were immigrating to our community. And there were a lot of people really struggling in poverty. And so these 8 churches got together and said, hey, what if we banded together and did something to try to help these people that aren't able to help themselves right now. And until about 1892, there was a strong faith-based component. So they did 3 things. They offered what they called then a Sabbath school, so what we would call Sunday school. They had an industrial school where girls and women could learn skills that could help them either be successful in marriage or to find a job. And then the third thing they did was what we would call relief or hardship assistance, but they would give money to people, or eventually they started creating opportunities for them to earn money so that they could pay their bills and buy food or buy wood or kerosene or whatever they needed to be able to run their homes. And eventually that led to a pretty strong network of collaboration with 50 other organizations that were doing similar work to make sure they weren't overlapping the work or they weren't forgetting people, like people weren't falling in the cracks despite all these different places trying to help. And that entity eventually ended up becoming what is now known as the United Way. So we've had this long connection in our community across lots of historical events that have really shaped how we deliver human care outside of healthcare in our metro area.
I was surprised when I went to the website. And like I said, I knew that you were around. I just didn't know really well what you did, and I never really had a need for any of your services, thankfully. But when I got to the website and I saw everything that you do, you cover a gamut of a lot of social problems.
Yes.
What do you think is the biggest social problem facing? I mean, you mentioned mental health, but that ties into a lot of different things. So when you're dealing with this, is it homelessness? Is it drug and alcohol use? Is it violence? What are the biggest problems that you see facing? Maybe it's a two-part question. The biggest problems and also the most complicated problems that you're seeing. They're not necessarily the same thing.
Yeah, well, poverty runs deeply across all of it. It contributes, and then it also perpetuates many of those social problems. And of course, then mental health and that unresolved cycle of trauma, the intergenerational transfer of childhood trauma and then subsequent adult trauma continues to fuel it. I think one of the things that we have seen is that mental health, there's so much stigma associated with mental illness and mental health. And so people will avoid talking about it or going to get help to address it. It is getting better, but it's a major challenge. And then when people have those traumas, it's impacting their mental health. I think we're also starting to see with younger generations the impact of social media and screen time that's been made available too early. It's actually, there's some research showing that it's rewiring brains and not in helpful ways. So we're seeing a real uptick in anxiety and depression with some young people. So all of that kind of combines where mental health and the issues related by mental health that's not regulated well is a real driver of a lot of the social problems. Then you add in poverty. Then you start to see substance use as people try to self-medicate. Then you start to see challenges with maintaining housing and employment, which is more poverty, and it just starts to pile up.
How many clients do you normally see, let's say, in a month? Or any time frame you want, I guess. But.
Well, annually, we serve pretty deeply in all of our programs between 13 and 15,000 people, and then another about 85,000 people with our outreach, with our prevention. So our staff that do substance use and problem gambling treatment, or problem gambling prevention education, are out in the community every day delivering presentations and lessons to students and our schools across our metro area. So we touch a lot of people that way. But deeply in the programs, it's a little over 1,000 people a month.
Have you, maybe it's too soon, now that we have the casinos on this side of the river, have you noticed any difference in the gambling problems that you're seeing?
I have, if we're seeing that, it hasn't reached my ears yet, so I don't know about that, yeah.
Is your staff paid, or are they volunteers, or both?
Our staff are paid, but we do have quite a few people that volunteer with fundraising. Obviously on our board, we have a pretty amazing guild that's been around since the early 80s that helps with a lot of that. We have volunteers that go into our programs and help with different activities and what have you, or who just come in and help with more like administrative things, filing and mailing and stuff like that. Yeah.
So if somebody wanted to help out or somebody wanted to donate, what's your web address?
It's www.heartlandfamilyservice.org. And there's no S at the end of service, so it's heartlandfamilyservice.org. I don't know why it's singular. It just always has been.
So I've been mispronouncing it.
Well, that's okay because everyone does. I even make the mistake sometimes. So, yeah.
And it's Heartland Family Service, not Heartland Family Services. Okay, yeah. So it's, you learn stuff on this podcast. Yeah. Take a quick break here. I want to remind people, speak about learning things. remind people about the fine folks at the Banner Garage in the Old Market. You know, it's I was thinking about, you know, Heartland Family Service been around 150 years. I haven't been around quite that long, but I remember when there wasn't that much to do if you went downtown. Now, of course, you've got not only the CHI Center for Concerts, you got the Slowdown, you've got the Orpheum, you've got so much to do. Holland Performing Arts Center, so much going on, plus all the great restaurants that you find in the Old Market and the surrounding areas. So if you find yourself in that vicinity for an evening out, make sure you make Havana Garage part of your night. Havana Garage in the Old Market. Tell them you heard about it on the Becca's Talking podcast. So as we talk about, you know, some of the problems we're facing and things like that, how are the numbers growing as far as, you know, are you seeing things picking up? You know, we hear all these things in the news about, you know, poverty and hunger and whatever it might be. Are you noticing the same trends with you as far as the number of people that you're seeing and the severity of the problems?
Yeah, we've certainly seen an uptick, especially since the pandemic. But it was actually starting before then. When I started at this organization in 2009, our annual operating budget was about $16 million, and now it's around $40 million. So it's really grown, especially the work that we do in the area of housing and in mental health, substance use treatment.
What are you doing in housing? I mean, with the mayor's race, that homelessness has been a bit of a problem, and actually I've done podcasts on the homeless problem. What is Heartland Family Service doing when it comes to homelessness?
We have two major program areas, the first being rapid rehousing. So when people are maybe experiencing homelessness for the first time, it's usually because just the perfect storm, a job loss, an illness, blow through your savings. Now you can't pay the rent or your mortgage, you lose your housing, and now you need to find help. So those programs, that program is really designed to be more short-term. That's why it's called rapid. So we get people in, we help them find a place to live. They sign the lease with their landlord, and then we pay the deposit, the rent, or some portion of it. It really varies based on how much income the person or the family has. And then once they're stable, we go away they continue on, and we go help somebody else. Then we have permanent supportive housing, and that is for people who have been what's considered chronically homeless. So that would be a year or more of homelessness, or multiple, I think 4 or more episodes of homelessness within a 3-year period of time. And they have to have some sort of disabling condition, which could be mental health or substance use or a physical disability or all of the above. And that is the population that most people, when they think of somebody who's homeless or what have you living on the streets, they're typically envisioning somebody who is probably chronically homeless. They've got that untreated mental health or substance use disorder. They aren't able to sustain housing because that isn't being treated, and so they're living in a park, or they're living in the woods, or in a camp, or wherever. They're just trying to get by. And that's a population where right now in our community, I think there's around 400 people that could use that, but we just don't have enough permanent supportive housing. So that's an area where we're really trying to expand, because that kind of program really requires a deeper level of understanding of behavioral health, which we have. And so we're actually in the process now of raising money to build a 25-unit permanent supportive housing facility. But we're already, I can't remember the number exactly off the top of my head, but it's, I think, somewhere between 300 and 350 households we're helping in with permanent supportive housing in our community.
I do a little self-promotion here, a shameless plug, on a previous podcast, and you can find it on YouTube. You can find it on wherever you're listening to your podcast. I went out on the street and I interviewed a bunch of these guys with the cardboard signs. You know, they'd say, we'll work for food and all that. I went and interviewed them, and there did seem to be a common thread through all of them, is that, mental health problems. They all had drug and alcohol issues. Many had talked about how they'd been abused as children. So the mental health problem was that part of it there too. But I also heard a lot of them saying that they didn't know where to turn. You know what I mean? It's like, well, I know maybe I could get help, but you know, they didn't really know where to turn. I also think that I've talked to some other homeless people like that in the past, and some of them just like the freedom it gives them. You know, they can stay drunk all day. They don't have to go to a job. They can sit on a street corner, make $50 to feed themselves, and they like that. Is there anything you can do for those type of people, or is it basically the ones you're dealing with, folks that find themselves, they lose their job, they had an illness or something along those lines, maybe getting out of an abusive relationship, and they're trying to go and get their life back on track. Those people, I think that you help those that help themselves. What do you do about those other people that we see on the street? Can you do anything for them?
Well, that's a third program area that we offer. It's not as big. It was bigger, but the funding for it, which was private funding, shifted away. The donor wanted to realize that they probably needed to invest more in affordable housing because we can provide all the case management and all the housing search in the world, but if there aren't houses that are affordable for clients to be able to take on their own, then it's pretty limiting. And so, but we have staff that we call it prevention and diversion. So they will, and that includes street outreach. So the street outreach folks will be out in the community, and this happens. We would work primarily in Council Bluffs, but other agencies would handle Omaha, and sometimes, of course, we all help each other, so we'd be there as well. But they're out every day, going to where the people are, and it can take years to build the kind of trusting relationship where they'll even want to talk about getting into housing, but there are a million examples of how that works. We even had one such client who we ended up inviting to serve on our board. It's a requirement when you receive funding from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development that you have someone on your board with lived experience. So I asked our staff, is there a client who's been housed for quite a while that would be a good client representative for our board? And so this gentleman served for a couple of years, and it was highly instructive, the feedback he would give sometimes in some of our conversations. He would say, what people want the most? They want socks.
Yeah.
And, practical stuff. But our street outreach worker found him living under a bridge, and it took 2 years before he was willing to have a conversation about moving into stable housing. He had been living on the streets for 40 years at that point.
If you haven't gone to the YouTube channel and see the interviews that I did with these homeless people, it was fascinating. It was just fascinating to hear their stories and to see where they stand. And you're right, and they just don't seem to. They get into their comfort zone. That is, as hard as it is for me to understand, living under a bridge is their comfort zone. And to get them out of that, I imagine it takes a lot of work.
Yeah, and then the other thing that we do is we use a research-based model called Housing First. So we offer people housing as long as they meet those qualifiers that the funders require. We get them in. We don't say you have to stop smoking, you have to stop drinking, you have to stop anything. We just get you in, and then once you're safe and stable, then we offer services. Eventually, 100% of our clients will take us up on the services, but it might not happen right away. I think sometimes when you put up those requirements, they actually end up becoming barriers, and that's what's keeping some of this population from ever leaving the streets, because they don't feel like they can give that up. It's been how they've survived all this time. But we can get them in, build a relationship, and help them to start to see, you can do this, and we'll help you, and we'll support you, and it won't be quite so scary.
When you say that you're looking at building like housing for 35 more units and that, or the housing that you already provide for those that are homeless, is it like an apartment complex like we see with like OHA, what they do, or is this a thing where individual houses, or what do you offer these people?
So right now, on both our rapid rehousing program is all landlord based. So we just work with individual landlords. If they want to work with us, then we will create those opportunities for our clients to see those units, and then if that's where they would like to live, then we move forward. With permanent supportive housing, it's mostly landlord based, but we do have 2 facilities in Council Bluffs. One has 7 units, the other has 16, and we're talking about building our first complex or building in Omaha, and that would be 25 units. Those would be single units only, because we have seen, and also for people over a certain age, which I can't recall, maybe 60, 65, because we're seeing that's where there's the hugest need when you look at the wait list, that our continuum of care, which used to be called Metro Area Continuum of Care for the Homeless, and now it's called Threshold. So when we look at the data, we see there's a lot of single individuals who are over a certain age that are kind of who qualify for permanent supportive housing, but there aren't enough units for them.
So the senior community is a rapidly growing homeless problem.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I have the data to say that, but I can say there are a lot of seniors who qualify for permanent supportive housing who need to be served, and so that's what we're doing there. Yeah.
That's interesting. And you say that, so these will be individual units. Do you have a problem with the whole NIMBY thing? You know, they don't want not in my backyard. You know, where are these houses are going to be built, or are they going to be all over town?
No, it's going to be one like apartment building with 25 units in it. There'll be offices for case managers and for the property manager. So there will be on-site support for the clients, a meeting room, laundry room, stuff like that. And it's on we own what we call it our Benson campus. It used to be the Archdiocese campus on Northwest Radio on 60th.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, it was St. James Orphanage. So there's 4 buildings on that campus, but there's enough additional land that we worked with an architect, and we hired another nonprofit actually out of Colorado that's got a lot of experience in this sort of thing. And they helped us look at different options, and they thought that was our best one on that campus because you've got lots of bus lines. There's plenty of room. We already own the land. And so that's where we'll build it. And it's already zoned for.
Very cool. So you mentioned that you do work in Council Bluffs.
Yes.
And obviously Omaha. How big of a surrounding area do you serve?
So we actually did a heat map to see where we have clients, and we have clients now in every county in Iowa and Nebraska. But that's probably mostly because we were helping people here, and then they ended up moving and living in other parts of each of the states. In Iowa, it's a little bit different because for probably the last couple of major floods, and then during the COVID pandemic, the state of Iowa, through their contract with FEMA, hired our agency to help with disaster recovery. So we had staff who were working remotely. A lot of the work was done over the phone. So when people would call in because they had COVID and they needed resources, and then they added the derecho storm to the list of things, or they were impacted by the derecho storm, our staff were doing information referral. What's the problem? Let me connect you to resources. They were doing some direct service as well, but in that instance, they were working with people all over the state. But other than that, we have about 20 locations. They're all primarily in the Omaha, Douglas, Sarpy, and then Council Bluffs, Pottawatomie County area. We do have a couple of offices small outpatient offices in Glenwood and in Logan, and our newest office is actually in Shelby County in Harlan, Iowa, where we have an assertive community treatment team that's serving rural Iowans. Assertive community treatment is a model that helps people with serious mental illness experience all of the supports that they would experience if they were otherwise hospitalized, but because they're in the community, we can keep them in the community so they don't ever have to go. We call it like a mental health hospital without walls. It's all the same services, but they can live in their own home.
You say that, okay, clients in every county, that they basically start here, but then they might move out to Scottsbluff or Norfolk or wherever. Are those like current clients that are still keeping in touch, or those past clients that maybe you got on the right path and now they're living a productive life somewhere else?
I would say most of them are probably past clients. For current clients, in Iowa, we have been asked to take on a bigger and bigger role, and specifically to serve the counties that are part of this. Iowa just went through a new process for how they coordinate or organize their various regions, and they created new regions, and we are basically assigned to serve the 12 counties that are part of Southwest Iowa region. So we'll be doing more in in that area. But for example, we have a school for kids K through 12 in Council Bluffs. We call it our therapeutic school that serves children who are living with mental illness. So they come to school, they have a special ed teacher and a licensed mental health practitioner and a couple of paraprofessionals who are working to make sure that their mental health is being managed so that they can learn and hopefully get back to their school. And that program, half the kids come from Council Bluffs Community School District, but the other half come from districts all over the Green Hills area education.
You know, and again, I've been very blessed in my life. So when you say you're dealing with kids in like second grade with mental health issues, I just think of kids being kids, and that you don't find a youngster like that having mental health issues until at least until maybe high school, where there's more peer pressure and all that sort of thing. But you don't think about little kids having mental health issues, but they do, huh?
Oh yeah, and that's been a big change. We have seen more and more like kindergartners, really the early elementary school kids needing this help. Yeah. And it's something schools aren't really prepared. Schools have programs to deal with learning challenges and behavior challenges, but not mental illness. And what's nice about our schools, because we have those mental health practitioners and a child psychiatrist who's there if they don't already have their own psychiatrist, he's there regularly, so that's a big challenge for kids with mental illness. As they grow, things change, and so the medications need to be constantly adjusted. And it can take a while to find the right medication or the right combinations of medications at the right dosages, and then to keep tweaking them as they grow and their bodies change. So we're able to do that in ways most school districts just don't have that expertise.
Are you dealing with like is it schizophrenia? Is it anxiety? Is it depression? Is there a special type of childhood mental illness?
It's all of those.
All of that, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I know, I guess it's out there. But when you don't have that in your life and you experience it like that all the time.
And then a lot of the kids will have other things too, like autism spectrum disorder, or they might have a behavior disorder, but that's secondary to their mental illness. So, yeah.
And now you say that most of your clients are referred by the courts. These kids, I wouldn't imagine, are not being referred by the courts. So how do they find you?
They're usually referred by the school district.
The school districts then refer you. Okay.
They start to, they have to have an education, individualized education plan. There's certain things that they have to qualify before a school district can send them to someplace outside of the school district, because of course they're responsible for educating their youth. So there's a lot of structure in place that would just keep districts from just pushing out kids that they might struggle with. And most districts really want to try to educate their kids in their district. So, but eventually with some of these young people, they recognize we're not successful, so let's find someone who can be.
Fascinating stuff. We've covered a lot of stuff, a lot of issues that Heartland Family Service provide. Is there anything we didn't cover that you want people to know that you also do this?
No, I think we've like you said, we do a lot of different things.
Yeah.
But it's really mental health, substance use treatment, housing instability, and then addressing underlying traumas, especially for survivors of domestic abuse, sexual assault, human trafficking, and really it's a whole person approach. Like, what can we do looking at this whole person that's not only going to address immediate needs, but get people to a place where they can be have that quality of life they deserve, be self-sufficient, where they can make sure their kids aren't exposed, or if they have been exposed to that trauma, it's healed quickly, so the next generation doesn't have to go through all that. And eventually our whole community will be in a better place.
It is interesting to see how so much of that is all interconnected.
Yeah.
Whether it be the mental health, and then the drug and alcohol use, or all the homelessness and all that.
Yeah.
It all is sort of interconnected. So you do have to sort of treat it as a whole person approach, right?
Yep.
All right. And again, the website for people. By the way, if they donate to the United Way, and they said that's a lot of your funding comes from the United Way. If you donate to the United Way, can people go and then say, I don't want to donate to this, but I'd like most of the money to go to Heartland Family Service? Can they specify that they want the money to go to you?
Yeah, United Way has always allowed donors to designate, but any money that goes to United Way, even if it doesn't end up coming to us, it's gonna do the community good. Like, they really are focused on basic needs, education, workforce, based on a ton of research that was done in this community, and we're happy to be part of that process. And plus, they're always doing things to help us all build our capacity to be even better at what we do. Yeah.
Wonderful. And the webpage again is?
heartlandfamilyservice.org.
heartlandfamilyservice.org, and go and make a donation, and see all that they do. And if you know somebody that can benefit from their services, let them know. Because reach out, because there is help out there. It's not always easy, but there is help. And there's a better life out there.
There sure is.
All right. Thanks to the fine folks at Havana Garage. Make sure that you like the Becca's Talking Facebook page. Follow us there, too. And I hope you like the new set. And thanks for joining us. Every Tuesday, 10 a.m., a new one comes up. But you can watch anytime you want at any of the traditional podcast sources. Till next time, take care, and bye, y'all.